Okay, good morning, everyone. Welcome to this session titled Basic Income, Commons, and Commoning. My name is Moonyoung Jo Moonyoung. I'm a professor in the Department of Cultural Anthropology at Yonsei University, and I'm also a member of Basic Income Korean Network. And I'm honored to be moderator for this intriguing panel. Throughout this conference, the theme of commons or commoning has emerged in the discussions of several speakers, stemming from diverse and intersecting perspectives. It is important to raise a practical question of how to finance basic income beyond taxation. And the idea of commons also encourage us to explore theoretical and political questions about how to think of basic income as a principle or process of organizing society and responding to inequality or the sustaining the growth. I hope that the insights shared by these presenters will stimulate thoughtful and reflexive dialogues. Let's proceed to our speakers' presentations. We have three speakers, and each presentation, I think it will be 15 to 20 minutes. So no more 20 minutes, please. Okay, and the first speaker is Minseo Jo Minseo. He's in sociology department at Wisconsin-Madison. Minseo and we conducted together about the youth basic income in Gyeonggi province in South Korea. The title of today's presentation is Translation of a Common Dividend Basic Income in South Korean Welfare Politics. It's a 공유부배당, right? Yeah. Okay, please welcome.
Recording in progress.
Hi, everybody. My name is Minseo Cho, and my presentation today is about basic income politics in South Korea that is in relation with the idea of common dividend basic income. I want to highlight how the basic income movement by Basic Income Korea Network developed its own politics in relationship with the idea of Commonwealth dividend. So here is the brief outline of our presentation today. I will first highlight common dividend discourse as one characteristic of basic income politics in Korea. Then, drawing from my fieldwork on Korean basic income politics, I will theoretically problematize the relationship between the idea of common dividend and basic income. It will be followed by two examples of how Commonwealth dividend discourse and basic income policy idea interacted in the real politics. So let's start with the definition of the basic income, which I believe will be quite familiar for almost all of you attending here. I will not repeat the whole thing provided by BN, but I just want to highlight that the definition by BIKN, Basic Income Korea Network, it's all the same with a BN definition, but additionally, it highlights that basic income should be a share based on everybody's rights to the Commonwealth, meaning basic income is a dividend coming from the Commonwealth. It's not only in the article, but it's also very prominent in the real basic income policy and politics in South Korea. First, the very first actually existing basic income policy, which is Seongnam Youth Dividend, made in 2015, is explicitly taking the word of dividend in its name. In addition to that, more recently, in the last presidential election, which was the election that was about to make the avid basic income advocate as the first basic income president in South Korea, his manifesto had a lot of namings, including dividend, to frame basic income. Regarding this, BIKN members and others who was working on this basic income as common dividend had a lot of preceding research on two things. First one, how to philosophically justify the basic income as common dividend. Secondly, they also worked on the practical necessity and strategic importance of advocating basic income as Commonwealth's dividend. The missing question here is, how did the advocacy for the basic income as a common dividend develop? This involves the question of translation, borrowing the word from A&T scholars such as Michel Calong or Bruno Latour. Meaning the question is, what kind of associations, alliances, and linkages between actors enabled such development between common dividend discourse and basic income? So let me start with two motivating vignettes that I had in my field. Both of them are having to do with basic income and monopoly game. Firstly, this field note is coming from the public forum I participated on how to frame basic income in December 2019. It was almost 1 year after the BIKN decided to define basic income as Commonwealth dividend. One of the participants, who later became a congressman in South Korea, asked the other participants to frame basic income for those fellow citizens who are not familiar with the idea. And his own answer was that basic income is a salary in blue marble, which is a Korean version of Monopoly, the board game. He mentioned that it constitutes a condition for and provides minimal compensation for the players to participate in the game so that they could remain and still play the game. It curiously as the logic of social security to economic security. So it is some kind of social protection, but at the same time, it is something that goes beyond the mere social protection, which reminds us of Michel Foucault's remark on negative income tax proposed by Milton Friedman in 1979, in his College de France lecture. He mentioned that negative income tax, which is guaranteeing the basic security for the actors of the economy, is reconstructing the social logic of protection and security that existed before. Let me give you another example that framed basic income totally different way from the first example. Here is another board game that I encountered during the basic income fair hosted by Gyeonggi province, while Jae-myung Lee, who later became presidential candidate and who proposed and implemented Seongnam Youth Dividend, while he was in chair or while he was governor of Gyeonggi province, he hosted a fair called Basic Income Fair. And there came a lot of related actors, not only politicians, social movements, activists, or scholars, but at the same time, it was joined by a lot of not exactly basic income movements, but also the other social movement organizations that had similar orientation towards post-capitalist transformation. The board game name was two words, share and monopoly. So it was kind of monopoly game reinvented by this association called Jubilee and Land Justice Association. There was a hidden history, according to them, of the game Monopoly. It was originally coming from so-called landlord game invented by Elizabeth Maggie, who was a feminist and socialist and Georgist activist who worked on landlord game to illustrate the teachings of Henry George, who was a famous thinker of land justice, land value tax, and others. So this association, Jubilee and Land Justice Association, revived the landlord game, which was forgotten history before Monopoly, to illustrate the spirit of anti-monopoly and citizens' dividend. So in this game, the players are not able to own their own land. They only can build buildings on their land, and they have to pay land value tax for the elect manager of the land and other commons. And those land value taxes that they paid are to be distributed as a basic income dividend. So here we are facing totally different images and prototypes of basic income. First example is framing basic income as a floor to continue the game for the players. The normative justification for such discourse is that basic income is a social minimum. Related and similar policy proposals or policy are as follows, like negative income tax proposed by Milton Friedman, or in North American politics, it is better known as guaranteed income, as studied by Stinsland, the sociologist. Also, it evokes other related policy ideas such as minimum wage, and in Korean context, more specifically, Korean basic living security and basic loan and housing, which was also proposed by the advocates of the most famous basic, which is basic income, Jae-myung Lee. On the other hand, when we focus basic income as a dividend, it gives a totally different picture. Dividend is not for continuing the game of economy at all. It is for due justice. It means basic income or dividend should be taken as a fair share of the Commonwealth. And the similar line of policy and proposals, if we approach the basic income as a dividend, the most famous example would be Alaska Permanent Fund dividend, which would be arguably the only existing actual basic income in a full scale for the whole members of the community. It also resonates with the common dividend or Commonwealth dividend as proposed by other basic income scholars. And not necessarily basic income, but also national dividend and social dividend and other forms of dividends are also forms of dividend thoughts. And here are the political questions raised by basic income as dividend. If we advocate basic income as floor, we can resonate with welfare politics. It means basic income is premised on the unconditional right to basic livelihood. So it is still distinguishable from the conventional logic of social security because it is, of course, because it is based on the right rather than the logic of social insurance from social risk, and also symbolically because basic income is trying to go beyond this cultural distinction between the deserving and undeserving poor. Still, this line of advocacy follows the logic of social protection. And this is the reason why basic income politics had an appeal to social welfare politics and other social democrats as well. On the other hand, if we approach basic income as dividend, it does not have to go necessarily with welfare politics because it is based on this politics of sheer presence as dubbed by James Ferguson as a ground for distribution. And it recognizes everybody as a shareholder of the commons. It means it resonates more with the politics of common than politics of social minima. And this kind of like theoretical tension between two ways of framing basic income was pretty much prominent in the real development of basic income as dividend in South Korean political scene. The first example would be Seongnam Youth Dividend. As we can see from its very name, it was proposed as one of the dividends. But the actual context of the political proposal was that it came after, or it came in the political context of welfare politics after 2010 local government election, which revolved around this axis of selectivism versus universalism. And Jae-myung Lee, then the mayor of Seongnam City, proposed it as his first basic income policy, and it was one of the 3 universal welfare package policy that he proposed together. If we see the content, it gave approximately $200 per season for 24 years old local youth. And a lot of basic income activists and scholars signified it as the very first actual basic income policy in Korea. And it was, of course, engaged actively by BIKN members. And in the documents or the policy context, it recognizes young citizens as the holder of shared wealth. But it still remains questionable whether their original intention was communicated and circulated among the public sphere. The language of the dividend was not politicized that much. There were a lot of oppositions and contestation coming from the ruling government, but it was contested as a welfare policy with others. And one of the most telling example was that it was confounded with the Seoul Youth Allowance, which was another cash transfer policy, but it's more means-tested and targeted program for the unemployed youth. But because they also were framed as allowance, the cash transfer, a lot of opposition didn't really make a meaningful distinction between youth dividend and youth allowance at all. This language of dividend was also later eclipsed with the implementation of Gyeonggi Youth Basic Income, which is a wider version of Seongnam Youth Dividend, and which was also proposed and implemented by Lee Jae-myung. And in the research that Moonyoung just mentioned in the beginning of our session, by the recipients of Gyeonggi Basic Income, it wasn't recognized as a dividend or share at all. It was also recognized by welfare or gift that should be reciprocated. Let me provide you with a more recent example. which was the case of Democratic Party's presidential campaign 2 years ago. So this happened after Lee Jae-myung and his main agenda, basic income, was more mainstreamed in our political scene. As the idea and the politician became more mainstream, there were increasing strategic engagement of BIKN in the presidential election, but it also meant that wider policy group, which comprised Keynesian and liberals and other social democrats who didn't necessarily support basic income as a common dividend, also interacted a lot to formulate this policy proposal. If we see his manifesto, the dividendee category are very much variegated, which is very different from as originally envisaged by BIKN members. So they provided 3 different lines of dividendee. First one was life cycle specific dividend, child, young adolescent, youth, senior. They are all were to given this amount of Korean won annually. In addition to that, they were also to be given particular dividend, which is only for the disabled and the farmer. Lastly, the very universal dividend for every Korean citizens was dubbed as land dividend. But we can see that the amount for the land dividend was far smaller than the category specific dividends, as I mentioned before. So there was a clear dissonance between the policy framing and substance. Even though they had the language of the dividend, they were pretty much penetrated by the logic of the social welfare, meaning the dividend or basic income, as they put it, were to protect those category-specific dividendee from social risk. And this was dominated by categorical particularism, which is the characteristic of the conventional social welfare protection. And it was in stark contrast to BIKN's own program, which was formulated by its own book, published in 2021, which is the same period with Lee Jae-myung's presidential activism. The book name was Welfare State with a Basic Income. As we can see from its very title, it also juxtaposes the word welfare state with a basic income, but they tried to make it as universal as possible. Rather than providing a category-specific dividends, they tried to universalize the dividend for every Korean citizen, the very same amount for every single citizen in Korea. So the last slides of my presentation, I want to argue that there was certainly a consensus building around basic income as common dividend within BIKN, which comprised various activists, scholars, and politicians. But it remains questionable whether this kind of consensus was widely circulated and shared in the political scene outside BIKN Korea. It also hints 2 things. First one, political opportunity of basic income as common dividend. If we can frame basic income as a common dividend, it has a potential to reconstruct a symbolic order of cultural classification, which try to distinguish deserving and undeserving poor. At the same time, we can argue that there is a potential to reconstruct the argument regarding how to fund the basic income. When we discuss the funding problem of basic income, we always encounter this word social expenditure, which is resonating with the conventional logic of the social risk, welfare state, social insurance, social risk, etc. At the same time, to successfully do this, I think there are a lot of challenges lying ahead of basic income activists as well. First one is mobilizing the conventional actor in the realm of the conventional social protection, comprising public officials, scholars, laws, departments, and other terminologies that is revolving around this fixed notion of the social protection. At the same time, they have this challenge of how to forge new alliances. And I think notably, this will come from a lot of new politics of commons and other not necessarily social welfare or protection-oriented politics. This is the end of my presentation, and thank you for listening.
Thank you for very for basic income, they really emphasize the dividend, the commons dividend. So the Minseo shows that issue and in terms of the political histories of South Korea. And then we go to, it's not about China, but it's kind of more broader issues about the AI. So we invite Jiabin. He came from China. As far as I know, he is the only scholar who came from mainland China in this conference. And I remember when we had a conference in 2016 in Seoul, at the time, there was the scholar from China, Yuan, right? Yeah, and then some scholars from China, they came and then to talk more about the China's the interest in basic income and then in terms of the collective system. But here, what Professor Ye, what he shows is rather different. So he focused more on AI. AI capitalism, and so I'm really excited to hear more about what you mean by capitalism and that you came from the socialist China and so how you kind of differentiate that issue from the socialist. Okay, so Ye Jiabin, he's from the Sun Yat-sen University, Zhongshan University, and he majored in philosophy. So he talks about what it is, the basic income in the age of artificial intelligence capitalism, which is quite broad topic. Okay, welcome, Professor Ye.
Thank you. And I can only speak one sentence of Korea. Okay. The only sentence I can speak in Korea is 안녕하세요. And good morning, everyone. And the title of my presentation is the basic income in an age of artificial intelligence of capitalism. And I will try to answer 3 questions in my presentation. Okay. Yeah. Okay. The first is, what is artificial intelligence capitalism? I think our chair have always raises the questions is very tough, and I will try to answer later. And okay, thank you. Okay, thank you. The technique has risks. Okay. And the second question is, what is the role? What is the role? Oh. Yeah, I can buy. Yeah, I can buy myself. Yeah. Okay. Okay, that's this one. Okay. Oh. Close the automatically and just buy my, yeah, this way you could start. Okay. Sorry. And the second question is, what is the role of basic income in artificial intelligence capitalism? And the last one is, how can we justify basic income in artificial intelligence capitalism? And the last part and the last question is what I want to focus. Today, we are standing on a threshold of a new era, a time marked by astonishing advancements in artificial intelligence that have left us in awe. It is undeniable that we are on the verge of what I like to call the age of AI capitalism. In simple terms, this means that AI is shaping our economy and society in a unprecedented ways. Just think about it. Just think about it. We have all witnessed the incredible things AI can achieve. Whether it is the mind-blowing capacities of ChatGPT or the rapid progress of other AI technologies, it is clear that AI is becoming an integrated part of our lives, at least for our youngest generations. And these technologies are not limited to mere entertainment. They are increasingly becoming essential components of how we communicate, how we live, and how things are produced. In essence, AI is reshaping the very core of our economy and maybe very detail of our societies in future. There are three reasons why AI develops so rapid and becomes so powerful. The first is the advancement in machine learning, and the second is the digital age has brought about the explosion of data. And the last is the development of the high performance computing hardware. I will jump it quickly and focus the third part. So a simple question is this the transformation good or bad? Indeed, it seems too simplified. The question is, as Dickens once said, it was the best of times, and it was the worst of times. The sentiment holds true for the current AI age. On one hand, we are reaping the benefits of the internet, big data, and AI technologies, and which have brought about convenience and positive changes. However, it also causing a shift in the value of the certain skills, jobs that are highly valued in the past now are losing their importance. But here's the twist. With the continuous advancement of the AI, we are witnessing that AI can make complex decisions in situations that we once thought only human beings can handle. Now, let's take a moment to look at the bright side, the positive side. AI has the potential to liberate us from the boring, the repetitive jobs, granting us from more time to pursue personal growth, and the patience. And at the same time, it enables the growth of economic productivity and a decent living standards. Furthermore, AI might catalyze the development of eco-friendly technologies, contributing to a sustainable future. So this is the positive side. However, the other side of the coin reveals the significant risks. Take the examples of the self-driving cars. They also create potential dangers, to name but a few. The impact of AI on the job market is another concern. There's a fear that the rapid automation brought that by AI might lead to job losses, leaving many individuals in vulnerable positions. Moreover, biases and discriminations could emerge from AI system, resulting in unfair treatment for certain groups. The spread of misinformation is another worrisome consequences. And then there's the unsettling worry that AI, with its immense power, could initiate actions that threaten human beings' existence. Just think about the future movies we have watched. It is possible in the future. AI may initiate a nuclear war or even a genocide of humankind. So it's that very, very blue future. this is the a statement on AI risk signed by many AI scientists, engineers, and entrepreneurs. This statement addresses the potential risks associated with the AI and calls for collective actions to ensure the responsible development and use of AI technologies. It says, mitigating the risk of extinction from AI should be a global priority alongside other society scale risks such as pandemics and nuclear war, and maybe the climate change or climate justice. It highlights the growing concerns about the implication of advancing AI technologies in our society and economic and even everyday life. So what is AI capitalism? By AI capitalism, I was want to show that such characteristics by kind of capitalism that just like the steam engine, the electricity, and the computers transformed capitalism in each era. AI is shaping a new form of capitalism, and indeed the transition is ongoing, is things in becoming rather than a fixed state. For example, it may be put the income in inequalities to an extremely situation. The concept of AI capitalism encompasses both positive aspects, like contributing to productivity, and also challenges, such as celebrating wealth inequality. And notice, just as the impacts it will invoke, the term AI capitalism itself is neutral. It's not by itself good or bad, positive or negative. It's neutral, reflecting AI's impacts on our economic system. So, how do we address these challenges? One proposed solution is the implementation of basic income. And an advocate of basic income is Sam Altman, the CEO of OpenAI. Basic income means that everyone receives a regular amount of money, and its potential benefits in the area of AI capitalism are significant. For example, firstly, in a short term, basic income can act as safety net for those who lose their jobs. It's not only a safety net that will struck someone, but a flow, and it offers them the time, the financial security to transition to new opportunities, and in a long run, it can free individuals from the compulsion to pursue traditional employment for survival. So this is sounds like a Marxist criticism on capitalism, and enabling them to engage in more innovative projects and industries. Secondly, basic income can tackle poverty effectively by ensuring that every individual has a minimal level of income. Given that traditional industries might struggle to keep pace with AI-driven changes, basic income become crucial. Additionally, a more substantial basic income amount can contribute to reducing income inequality by redistributing wealth generated by AI-driven companies more equally. there's an ongoing debate about the actual challenges that will occur in the labor market about AI capitalism. And optimists believe that as traditional job positions disappear, new opportunities for work will emerge. And on the other side, the pessimists on the other hand argue that many jobs will be replaced, particularly in the so-called meaningful employment opportunities will inevitably decrease. The discussion on this issue is often misunderstood and requires clarification. So the question is, what are we concerned about when we're talking about the disappear of job positions? Are we worried about the absence of the work itself, or are we concerned about the losing income? So if the fear is about losing income and the apprehension that the AI might take away the means of livelihood for many, this can be elevated through. So this can be elevated through measures like basic income. In this context, losing a job is not necessarily regrettable or bad. And to use Marxist terminology, such work is full of alienation. If the worry is about losing a beloved job rather than losing income, that's a different scenario. For most people, what they truly fear is losing employment, which means losing the means of subsistence. It's leading to a significant decline in living standards. So this is one of the reasons why basic income becomes necessary in the context of AI capitalism. So the last part is why basic income. So I will justify the basic income in the in AI capitalism by two sides. That is, basic income can justify as a gift distribution and also a risk sharing. The first part, the gift distribution, as the Professor Philip van Parijs has do great jobs in justification of the real freedom for all, or the real libertarianism argumentation of the basic income, that the development of the AI can be and should be a gift distribution mechanism that everyone can benefit from the development of AI technologies. And the reason why, philosophically speaking, the reason why we should see the AI capitalism as a gift distribution mechanism, that's because the development of the AI technology benefits from the knowledge, the heritage of the presters, and also some the knowledges of our ancestors. This is one side, but the other side I want to stress is that AI technology has a very dangerous and has many risks and has dangerous future. So if we decide to go towards a future that with the development of AI, then we should see each other as a mutual decisioner to say yes to that we can sharing risks by each other. Then, if so, we must sharing the wealth, the benefits of the development of the AI technologies, because we at least, and especially for the least disadvantaged person who has the less the power to overcome such dangerous risks, should be maximin principles help them to overcome such risks. So it should be justified by both sides, not only a gift distribution and distribution, but also a risk sharing. And I want to add another sentence about the free ride objection. So just think about, we are not someone inside a car and someone are outside. We are in a same train, high-speed train of a train towards tomorrow, the future of AI technology. So we should must showing our risk to some dangerous future. So I think this will give us objection to the free ride criticism. Sorry for my English, and so that's all. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So he showed about the basic income issues in terms of the AI, capitalism, and so yeah. Now we all know that many people, especially in IT industry, they're really interested in basic income, which is quite related to Professor Ye's presentation and why they are interested in that. And many people, for example, in Silicon Valley and also the IT industries in South Korea, they are also interested in basic income, and sometimes they are conduct the pilot projects very widely. So I'm wondering whether or not the IT industries in China, for example, Alibaba or the Baidu or Tencent, and then how they are also interested in basic income, and then are there some the parties or the pilot projects going in China, and then probably you have some time to talk about that later. Yeah, and thank you. And then now we have the final presentation. His name is Seung Lee. Seung Lee is professor in anthropology department in Seoul National University. And then he has worked on the problematics of the social, and then also now he turned to the study of finance, which is quite interesting project. And so his topic is quite related to the first presentation and made by the Minseo. So we can think further about the commons dividend, and then especially in terms of the critical theory. Okay, so welcome, Professor Seung Lee.
Thank you for introducing me, Moonyoung, and hi all. So today, the title of my presentation is Beyond Flow Without the Ceiling, the Rise and Challenges of Common Dividends, Basic Income, so CDBI. As Moonyoung mentioned, I mean, Minseo already explained many things about common dividends, so I will try to keep my presentation as briefly as possible.
Can you raise the mic closer to your mouth?
Yeah, okay. So can I use this mic or? Yeah. Oh. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to make these troubles. Okay, so is it okay? Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah. Is it okay? Yeah. Okay, let's get started. So as we all know, there are various ideas of basic income, and there are also diverse discourses to support and justify the ideas of basic income, from right-wing anarcho-capitalism to leftist libertarianism. So among them, I want to today focus on a recent rising trend in which people find justification for basic income in a right to commons or commonwealth. Commonwealth means the wealth generated from commons. So these relatively new efforts to link basic income with the notions of commons or commonwealth are found globally. For example, Guy Standing's recent work or Brent Ranaley's book. But the attempts have gained kind of significant popularity within South Korean basic income communities, as Minseo already explained. For example, the Basic Income Korea Network, BIKN, has redefined basic income in 2019 as follows. Basic income refers to the income that is paid in cash to all, unconditionally, individually, and regularly based on the rights of all members of a society to the Commonwealth. At the same time, BIKN's official publication, 개간 기본소득, has featured diverse discussions exploring the relationship between basic income and commons or commonwealth. Meanwhile, the BIKN's scholarly members have been developing theoretical frameworks to legitimize and justify basic income as commons or commonwealth dividends. So this presentation will examine these endeavors, these efforts that redefine basic income as commons dividends, I call it CDBI hereafter, and situate their implications and significance within the historical context of contemporary basic income movements. This presentation is divided into two parts. First, I will provide a brief exploration of the complicated relationship between neoliberalism and the global rise of basic income movements. And this exploration aims to illuminate the meanings of the idea of CDBI. And then I will discuss the key arguments of CDBI and explore the challenges that it has encountered. Okay, so the global rise of basic income movements in the late 20th century interestingly coincided with the expansion of neoliberalism. So my question is this mere coincidence, or are there indeed some shared concerns or worldviews between neoliberalism and basic income? So basic income movements need to be understood in a complex global context, including various cash transfer programs implemented in the global south since the 1990s. But due to time limits, my focus here will be on exploring the experience of Western countries within the framework of Fordist and post-Fordist capitalism. Okay, this diagram provides a rough illustration for the structure of the Fordist social contract, which worked during the so-called golden age of capitalism after the Second World War until the late 20th century. The Fordist social contract was established on two fundamental supports, male breadwinner family model and the ideal of full employment. In the realm of the family, the Fordist family wage, including compensation for the reproductive labor by female housewives, facilitated the transformation of mass working class into middle class asset owners, so making mass middle class society. This approach aimed to prevent these people from pursuing socialism and challenging to private ownership. On the other hand, stable employment ensured access to social insurance, which managed various risks deviating from the conventional laboring life trajectory, such as unemployment, workplace accidents, and retirement. Also, redistribution policies were implemented in the forms of progressive taxation and the transfer of social properties. As a result, the post-war welfare state or social state undertook the role of the last insurer that is responsible for the administration of these four supports. And as we all know, this model collapsed after the 1970s, 1980s, and underwent neoliberal reforms. Due to its internal contradictions and external economic crisis, each element of the Fordist social contract began to be subject to suspicion, criticism, and political debate from both the left and the right. For example, in opposition to full employment, the discourse of labor flexibility and deindustrialization were raised from the right. Meanwhile, the left criticized the alienating and oppressive aspects of labor and deployed work refusal strategies. The debate over the male breadwinner family model was more complex, but in general, the right had a strong interest in dismantling the Fordist family wage and promoting entrepreneurial and flexible family models, while the left and feminists criticized the patriarchy and heteronormativity inherent in the male breadwinner family model. And finally, regarding when it comes to social insurance, right-wing discourses problematized the financial burden and inefficiency of the welfare state, emphasizing personal responsibility for risk management. In contrast, leftists criticized the exclusive normativity within the social welfare system and resisted the expansion of state bureaucracies. Such critics of the Fordist social contract from both sides contributed to the reconfiguration of the post-war welfare state, leading to its transition to neoliberal regime based on flexible work and family. So we usually call this process neoliberalization. And interestingly, these transformations have also served as conditions for the resurgence of global basic income movements. The technology of cash transfer, which only occupied a marginal position in the social insurance welfare system, has re-emerged as an attractive option for a new social security system. In fact, despite their internal differences, various ideas of basic income are largely based on a common understanding of contemporary realities. That is, the key three supports of the post-war Fordist social security system, i.e. full employment, male breadwinner model, and social insurance, have been collapsed and irreversibly replaced by neoliberal conditions. This shared belief is reflected in the main principles of basic income. For example, let's see BN's famous, widely accepted definition of basic income. We all know this definition. So in this definition, the phrases such as unconditionally and without work requirement reflect the belief that work cannot be the basis for social security any longer. And on an individual basis shows the rejection of the male breadwinner family model, while cash transfer reveals suspicions on the inefficiency and oppression of the social insurance system. So in this sense, the idea of basic income runs the risk of sharing neoliberalism's market utopia. Instead of aiming to curb capital accumulation and reduce widening inequality, basic income often places bigger emphasis on providing individuals with the options to pursue their own social security by granting them cash. To borrow Samuel Moyn's recent words, basic income appears to envision a social security system that lacks a ceiling to limit wealth accumulation and inequality, focusing more on providing a flow of protection against the worst tragedies that free markets can produce. Rather than pursuing to reduce inequality, traditional basic income movements seem to envision a social security systems in which individuals are guaranteed a minimum standard of living, survival through cash transfers and market consumption. This could explain why basic income often garners unexpected support from Silicon Valley entrepreneurs, conservative politicians, and even anarcho-capitalists. Especially when it is given in insufficient amounts, basic income might reduce capital's burden concerning labor reproduction costs and potentially contribute to the proliferation of a flexible, low-wage workforces. Moreover, basic income can be a solution to potential insufficient demands caused by technological innovations, explained by Jiabin, like AI. If the provision of such a floor can legitimize the unlimited accumulation of wealth, there will be no reason for innovative capitalists to oppose the idea. Then, in what ways can a basic income go beyond the passive acceptance of neoliberal conditions and its market utopia. What conditions are necessary for basic income to function as a catalyst for a new social contract that provides not only a floor for survival, but also a ceiling to control inequality? I think that CDBI can present an answer to these questions by actively highlighting and addressing the concepts of commons and commonwealth. CDBI engaged with the matter of private ownership, an issue overlooked by the Fordist social contract. According to advocates of CDBI, commons and commonwealth can be categorized into two types: natural commonwealth, including land, natural resources, and the environment, and artificial commonwealth, including knowledge, cultural assets, and data, etc. So they argue that since these forms of commons do not exclusively belong to specific groups, but are created through collective social efforts, it is justifiable to distribute the revenue from them in the form of universal basic income. For instance, even if we allow some private profits from land or natural resources, the resources themselves are commons. As a result, a portion of the profits should be shared among everyone. Big data can be another example. Given that its creation involves the contributions from everyone, the profits from it should be distributed among all citizens. So proponents of CDBI furthermore extends their perspective beyond viewing commons or commonwealth as an important funding sources for basic income. Here is a quotation from Brent Ranalli's recent book. So you can see, as you can see, so basically they define and rationalize basic income through the lens of a right to commons and commonwealth. So BIKN's new definition of basic income that we already discussed can be a good example of this. In this way, CDBI offers the potential to introduce a ceiling that curbs and control inequality and advocates for more equal redistribution of social wealth. Several questions need to be addressed for the idea of CDBI to effectively become a catalyst for a new social contract. So first of all, as admitted by some CDBI proponents, the concept of commons itself does not inherently or necessarily lead to endorsing basic income. That is to say, even if citizens have an equal right to commons, there is no inherent rationale that it must be distributed in the form of universal basic income. In fact, we can think of various other forms of distributions. Simultaneously, due to the ambiguous scope of commons or commonwealth, it needs to be addressed how the scope of commons or commonwealth can be defined, and who should be recognized as the custodians of the commons. For instance, when asserting that natural resources belong to everyone, questions arise regarding which resources qualify as commons, as well as who is everyone, whether it is local community members, citizens within a nation state, or the global population. More importantly, we should ask whether CDBI inherently contradicts with the neoliberal conditions embraced by some traditional basic income movements, i.e. labor flexibility, reliance on money and market, and an emphasis on individual autonomy. For example, while commons calls for social cooperation and reciprocity among people managing the commons, there is limited room for such a collaboration within the framework of traditional basic income that emphasizes individual autonomy. In addition, CDBI is essentially built upon the premise of receiving one's rightful share in monetary form, which unintentionally risks reinforcing and expanding the liberal idea of ownership, that everything belongs to a certain owner, and this ownership must be always safeguarded. Furthermore, despite the something for everyone principle underpinning commons, the actual execution of basic income hinges on citizenship of a particular political community, often a nation state or a local government. As a result, CDBI runs the risk of escalating disputes over citizenship boundaries and intensifying market competitions among political communities striving to increase their commonwealth. Guy standing on advocate of CDBI seems to recognize this risk. He says, one concern is that to increase the size of dividends, commoners might support a rapid rate of extraction of commons resources and commons depleting commercialization. So the conclusion, despite these potential tensions and contradictions, the idea of CDBI is deserving of attention as a compelling attempt that seeks to establish fresh foundations for social security and solidarity within the framework of neoliberal conditions. The widespread global trend of neoliberalization since the late 20th century has destroyed the basis of full employment and intensified the precarity of life, and thereby disrupted the former Fordist woke social security paradigm. While accepting these neoliberal conditions, CDBI presents an opportunity to replace this dysfunctional woke social security program with a new commoning social security program. So what can be the future envisioned by universal basic income? On one hand, there would be a neoliberal market utopia characterized by a flow without a ceiling, offering only minimal safeguard for survival. In contrast, we can also imagine a new ideal of social solidarity, where our very existence forms the foundation of our right to society's commonwealth. Although partial, CDBI seems to present a potential way to the latter future, like new solidarity, new social contract. This presentation does not intend to advocate for or against the CDBI. Instead, I have examined its implication in comparison to other basic income ideas and proposed the necessary considerations to clarify its political orientation. As the idea of CDBI is still in its infancy, the future of CDBI remains unanswered. What is clear, however, is that the issue of ownership and private property has re-emerged as the focal point for new alternatives and returned to the center of debates within basic income movements. Thank you.
Thank you, Seung-cheol. Yeah, it's really interesting discussion. But I'm very sad. We have only 8 minutes for discussion. But the Seung-cheol exactly shows what possibilities and predicaments are when we think of basic income in terms of the commoning and commons. And then now we have the discussion time, but now I think so I hope we can get more questions, although yeah, it will be only 1 or 2. I'm sorry. Yes.
Right. Professor. Not working. I'm Peter Knight, from news editor for Basic Income Earth Network. I would like Professor Ye to see if he could talk a little bit about what does AI capitalism under Chinese socialist conditions differ from AI capitalism in the capitalist countries? Do you think there's any difference, or are we basically dealing with the same phenomenon and just recognize that capitalism under whatever name functions more or less the same?
Okay, thank you. And then yes.
one, I had the same question for Jiabin as the one that has just been asked. And very interesting presentations. The other two that are related. I have one bit of information and then one question. Bit of information is, in fact, at the birth of the basic income network, there was this link with neoliberalism, which was ambivalent. In fact, the group with which earned the prize, with which we organized the 1986 conference, was essentially the same as a group that had launched the year before in order to publish a special issue of a journal under the title Neoliberalisms, and the same journal published 1 year later the first formulation of the basic income proposal, and then with which we won the prize, etc. And the relationship was ambivalent because it was neoliberalisms with an S, in order to insist that there were some interesting things in neoliberalism and some things that needed to be rejected. And one of the interesting things, important things, was the stress on freedom, and linked to what I said the other day, so that we shouldn't let the right and the neoliberal right appropriate the notion of freedom. We should take it on one. But of course, at the same time, there were many things that needed to be rejected. And therefore, the basic income project was conceived as an alternative both to the old state socialist utopia. This was a few years before the collapse of the Soviet Union, but also an alternative to the neoliberal utopia. And so we needed something else that was neither of these two things. And the question is really, so there's this idea of a commons dividend, and then the older idea of a social dividend. But in a way, the idea to which you referred, the idea of the social dividend is more ambitious, because it says what is our common ownership is not only these things that can be described as a commons, and you rightly insisted that the exact perimeter, and so the boundary is not that clear, is not only our commonwealth, it's not only these, what can be called the commons, it's everything, because it's the productivity that enters into our wages is part of this commonwealth. And so people like G.D.H. Cole or James Mead in the 1930s, when they started thinking about the social dividend, said, well, all this is in fact our common property, we can tax it all, of course taking incentives into account, and then share it equally as a social dividend. So it's a more ambitious idea, but at the same time, it has less of the intuitive appeal which Moyne stressed. And you quote from Moyne that says there is a fundamental right to these commons. So it's so like in Alaska, like Thomas Paine, etc. And that's more on the sort of left libertarian. It's a generalization of the left libertarian approach, but I personally remain committed to the more ambitious social dividend approach.
And guy standing, yeah. Hey, first. Yeah, we have only 5 minutes.
Thank you very much. We were kept in a car for an hour, so I very apologize to the first two speakers. We missed your presentations. I apologize. We enjoyed the traffic. My question, it relates to the third paper, which I really enjoyed. And I would suggest you do not make the distinction between the natural commons and the artificial, because you don't need to. We have social commons, we have civil commons, cultural commons, and knowledge commons, and they're not artificial. They're what are bequeathed to us, we inherit. And in traditions, the commons are accepted as what has been accepted as a commons for at least 20 years without contestation. So it's a workable definition. Now, the quotation you put up from me about the concern is dealt with by the intergenerational equity principle. So I encourage you to use that. because the stewards of a commons are responsible for making sure that the capital value of a commons is preserved and passed on to next generation of commoners. So we have a rule, and even the World Bank accepts the legitimacy of that rule through the Hartwig rule. So I would encourage you to incorporate that, because then you can get around that particular objection. So I'd like to hear your response to that.
Yes. Yeah, finally. Thank you.
I want to congratulate all of you. For me, is something rather new, the concept of commons, and I believe that it has much to do with how can we obtain peace in the world. If Russia and Ukraine and Israel and Palestine and all the countries that are in wars, if they think about what is the commons and how can we all profit, how can we all benefit with the concept of commons, we might go in the direction of peace. Thank you.
Yeah, we are running out of time, but I really want to hear just a few comments from the Jiabin and Seung and about all the questions. So could you give us only 30 seconds for it? Oh my goodness. Yeah. It's out of control. Yeah.
So, thank you. I will try. And the first question is, what the AI capitalism do I mean? And is there a difference from the so-called AI capitalism in China from the other regions? And to be honest, I use the capitalism just as economic and stress the market. The core of the market mechanism to redistribution, to organizing the trends, and so it will create inequality, but it will give us the freedom to change and freedom to communicate. So I think it may be no different, because the market is in China is the same with the other places. And the other questions, I'm not sure I understand the question of Philip rightly, but I want to introduce the reason why I stress the reason why I stress we should justify the basic income in AI capitalism, and by not only as a we should benefit from the commons, for example, like the common knowledge, the common technology, but also we should shielding our risk, because we are going to the future and we are a mutually connection, and we are in a community. So I want to strengthen the relationship and the picture for the future. So that's the answer. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for useful comment and for comments and information. Dr. Guy Standing, I will So I will incorporate your suggestions in my paper, and also okay, thank you. And when it comes to social dividends, I mean, thank you for reminding me of social dividends. Actually, I haven't thought about this project, but maybe my next project will be to compare social dividends and commons dividends and what social means in social dividends and or what is commons and what's the relationship between commons and society and social property and these things. Yeah, thank you for reminding me. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much for wonderful presentations and wonderful comments and questions. So I hope we continue to have conversations after this panel, outside this room. Okay, thank you so much for coming and connecting. Thank you.